All right, guys, thank you for coming out tonight. This is my dad, Tab Walker, the guy who taught me anything and everything about fishing. He is a fishing guide out at the Outdoor Sportsman's Lodge in Newton, Illinois.
Newton Lake.
Newton Lake. And yeah, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Well, thanks guys for having me here. I'm going to go over some of the things. We're going to talk about tournament fishing. I've won a lot of tournaments. Haven't fished in any tournaments for a while because I guide every day now, so I don't really have time to fish tournaments. And to be honest with you, I'm making about 50 times more money than the guys who are fishing the tournaments. So that's why I'm just out there guiding. But before that, I used to fish a lot of tournaments, and I'd say one of the big keys to winning tournaments isn't just catching fish, but you got to pre-fish enough that you can figure out where the biggest fish in the lake are. Because just catching fish doesn't win tournaments. Catching the biggest fish in the lake is what wins tournaments. And especially if you're on a lake that there's a lot of good fishermen, they're going to be out there pre-fishing too. One of the biggest reasons why I won a lot of tournaments was I just out pre-fished people. And I knew before the tournament started where I'm going, what I'm doing, and I know I'm gonna catch a bunch of big fish because I've spent days and days and days out there. Now I understand with your guys' schedule that might be a little tough to do while you're in school or whatever, but I'm talking about later on in life if you guys continue fishing tournaments and things like that. Pre-fishing is really a key to winning tournaments. The more you can learn about a lake, there are times where like a certain area will turn on. Maybe you can't get a bite there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Maybe it turns on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and if you go there the next day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon pre-fishing and you see the fish turn on there, well, now okay, I'm going there at 2 o'clock, but I'm fishing other places. I'm not going to waste my time there at 8 o'clock in the morning fishing that area. Things like that. The other thing is you want to develop skills in certain lures that produce big fish. Like to me, there are typically, there's a lot of things that catch fish, but there are certain lures that catch bigger fish. And so when I'm tournament fishing, I'm probably going to limit myself to a group of different things that I know that are going to catch the bigger fish. A jig is going to be my number one. Okay, I'm just telling you right now, a jig is going to catch bigger fish day in and day out than anything else you can throw. And this is what I throw more than anything else. I'm using a 7'6", flipping stick, and I'm throwing a 3/8 ounce rattling jig. That would be the number one thing that I'm throwing. Okay, I like the Strike King Rage Craw for a trailer. There are sometimes I'll use other things too, but that Rage Craw day in and day out has a lot of action, and to me that'll get you more bites than just about anything else you can put on the back of a jig. So I fish those a lot. Now I'm going to tell you, there are times where you can be out there on the water and you can learn some things. Even if you think you're pretty good at something, there's days that'll show you that maybe you don't know everything there is to know about that, and I'll tell you about one. There was a day that I went down a bank throwing a black and blue jig. I'm catching a fish here and there, but it's a little bit tough. And I get through with that bank and I'm kind of coming back on the opposite bank. And I look over there and there's a guy whacking a fish on the same bank I just fished. He is catching a fish, man, every 20 feet down this bank. And I'm looking over there going, what the hell is this guy doing? Because I just fished that bank. He's throwing a black and blue jig. That's what I just fished there. And I'm like, what in the world can this guy be doing differently, than I just fished? So I actually went over and talked to the guy. And the guy said, you know what? He said, I had a bigger jig on and I was just catching a few fish here and there, but I broke it off and the only jig I had left in my box was this little 1/4 ounce size. Like this. So you can see comparing this jig to this jig. There's not a huge difference, but there's a little bit of a difference. And that's all the difference was. The guy started out throwing this, he went to the only other jig he had, which was this 1/4 ounce size with a smaller trailer, and he literally caught 5 times the amount of fish down that bank that I did, just because he's just throwing a little bit smaller bait. So there are times where, especially when the lake's getting pressured a lot, you know, like if it's springtime, like our lake especially, everybody's trying to catch a lunker bass, and if it's a weekend, there's more boats there, and a lot of people, well, and if you're fishing a tournament there, it's going to be on a weekend. If there's a lot of people going up and down every single bank, and you're struggling to catch them on the bigger jig, try a smaller jig that has no rattles on it. It's just a little more finesse. You'll be shocked at how many times, sometimes even the big fish want that size bait over this one in a pressure situation. So that's one of the main things that I definitely fish a lot. And the 3 biggest fish that I've ever caught at this lake are 9-12, 9-2, and 9 even, and all 3 of those caught on a jig and on lay down trees, that sort of thing. I've been pretty fortunate. We've done 52 TV shows at our lodge, and so I've gotten a chance to fish with a lot of really good people, you know. And I tell you what, if you think you're pretty good at something, you go out in a boat with somebody who's the best in the world at it, you'll find out that, man, there's some stuff that they do that's a lot different than what you thought or what you do maybe. And so the guy that I've learned the most, especially jig fishing from, is Denny Brower. He's done the most TV shows with us. He's done 17. And Denny's really good at a lot of things, but when we're out there, you know, fishing on the day, you know, this is a guy that makes a 7-figure income bass fishing. So you're thinking, okay, what's he doing that's different than just your average bass fisherman, you know? And so I'm watching everything that he's doing, and he can put this thing on just a dime every single time. I mean, he's really good at that. But if I had to pick out one thing that he does just phenomenally better than the average guy, he's detecting strikes on subtle bites and catching fish that other guys wouldn't know they're getting a bite on. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? Like, and here's what he does. Like, everybody knows, you know, when you feel a bump, everybody knows that's a bite. Okay, everybody's going to catch that fish. But what he's doing is he's taking a jig and he throws it in a swimming pool. Okay, and he gets used to exactly what that jig feels like when nothing at all is happening with it. Okay, it's just going in a swimming pool. When he's out fishing, you know, let's say he's going down a bank, we got a lot of reeds. We fish a lot of reeds and just pitching baits up in there. And sometimes, even big fish, they will just barely suck your bait in. And if you pull on it, they'll open their mouth and just let it go back out. Like I say, a lot of guys don't even know they're getting a bite in that situation. But he will throw this bait out, and if he knows how long it takes to fall. Like if it stops falling before, let's say he knows the water's 3 or 4 feet deep there, and it stops falling at 2 feet. There's a reason why it stopped. I mean, you know, something ate it before it got to the bottom. Even if you didn't feel a strike, he's setting the hook on that. Most guys wouldn't even know they're getting a bite. Okay. If it feels heavier than it should, he's setting the hook. If it feels lighter than it should, sometimes the fish will grab something in there and they'll actually come towards you, and you'll pick up on it and you won't even feel your bait. That's when something has it and it's coming towards you. So just any little thing, even if you just see like a boil in the water sometimes, something probably just ate your bait. He sets a hook on all those things. I do too. I'm not telling you I'm as good at it as he is, but that's some of the things that takes a guy, you know, that's the difference between a guy who's making 7 figures, you know, fishing a jig, and somebody else who's paying money to go fishing, you know, things like that. But some of the other baits that I like to throw in the springtime besides a jig is a fluke type bait, Zoom super fluke type bait. When the fish are in pre-spawn and up, especially around reeds and weeds and things like that, this is a really good bait that you can catch a lot of fish on too, and this will produce some big fish. And I use this on I put this on a hook that actually has a screw lock, where it screws into the head of the bait like that, and then you can just bring it around and hook it that way. You guys can pass that around if you want. But that's one of the baits I like for that as well. If the conditions aren't super weedy, like this bait's going to get hung up a lot if you're fishing in a lot of weeds, but especially clear water and especially cold water. Like for example, Lake of the Ozarks, sometimes the water's pretty clear down there, things like that. But these jerk baits like this, you just twitch that thing down a couple times and sort of let it just sit there. It'll come up a little bit, and you twitch it down a couple more times. And with 3 hooks on here, if a fish hits this at all, they are going to hook up on that. That's one of the most secure fish catching baits. Like if you get a bite on that, you hardly ever lose a fish on this bait. Now a couple of things I will say that are very important is some baits don't come out of the box with the greatest hooks on them. This one here actually, and this is a Berkeley bait. This is something that you guys could get through Select Angler too. But these come with pretty good hooks on them. But even baits with good hooks on them, they will go bad. And one of the easiest ways to lose fish is to not have super sharp hooks. I mean, you want super sharp hooks on anything that's got treble hooks on them. And so if I suspect those aren't good at all, I usually change to these mustads. These are really good hooks. You can get these at Bass Pro or wherever, but I change those out. And another thing that I change out all the time is, this is one of my favorite topwater baits. This is a KVD Sexy Dog. It's in sexy shad color. This is the sexiest bait you can possibly buy. But these come with 3 hooks on them too, and they're the back one actually is just a regular hook too. I don't like that as well, and so I will take these and I'll buy these feather trailers, and I always put the feather trailers on the back end of the bait. And I'm sure you guys have probably seen it, but when you twitch a bait like that, that feather trailer will slick back, and then when it stops, that thing will just kind of spread out like that, and the fish see that, and they just can't hardly resist that. So I always change out all my topwater, like walk the dog baits and poppers, with these feather trailers, like those a lot. Little frogs like this over the top of vegetation, really, really good. This I'm using basically the same hook as this here. Now, depending on whether you want this to stay pretty much on the surface, like this frog, I typically swim over the top of things, and so you can see it doesn't have any weight. It's just a bare hook with a screw-in lock on the top of it. With this, if I want this to get down, you know, to where it can kind of slowly get into maybe 4, 5, 6 feet deep, you see it's got a hook that's got a built-in, you know, built-on little weight there. So this bait will kind of flutter down and get in front of some fish there. Something else I use, if you guys like fishing Texas rigs, like I fish a lot of Texas rig worms and like beaver baits and that sort of thing, but I don't know if you guys have ever seen these parasite weights. As far as I'm concerned, these are the best bullet weights. I don't use anything but these. But what these parasite weights will do is, you take a hook and you put this through there, and this thing will actually lock, like right there to the, see where it locks in the bend of that? It'll do 2 things. Number one, it locks your weight right to the head of your bait. The other thing that it does is it blocks right here. It blocks your bait from sliding down. Like if you come through cover typically with just a regular hook like this, you know, it can slide the tip of your bait down here. But with this parasite weight on there, you cannot slide the bait down at all. And these will also make your plastics last a lot longer. Like the hooks, the weights are kind of expensive, but you'll catch 10 or 15 fish off of one piece of plastic that might have gotten torn up, you know, real quickly with something else. So you can pass that around there if you want to as well. I wouldn't really call this a big fish bait, but on days when the bite's really tough, probably a lot of you guys fish these already. Just a wacky worm. Okay. You guys have seen this where you put the bands on them and all that jazz. If you haven't, I'm going to show it to you here. But these are, again, I wouldn't say this is so much a big fish bait, but this is more of a, man, the bite's pretty tough, and we want to slow down and just see if we can get in front of some fish and get some bites, because there are days like that where you go out there and, man, you can't hardly buy a fish. That's a pretty good bait, and what I do is I put that little band on there like that with this band application tool, and then I'm not actually hooking the hook through the bait at all. I'm just hooking it through the band, and that makes those last a long time too. So, and that's a hook right there that has a little bit of weight on it. So if you're throwing it up into 5-6 feet of water, that's going to get down into places like that as well. What questions? You guys have any questions? Anything else I can answer for you? Oh, I know what I was going to talk about this tree. I don't want to waste this artwork here. So, so who was the tree fisherman over here? You? You're the tree fisherman? So what, how are you going to, okay, here's your boat. You're coming down the lake this way. How are you going to fish this tree? Explain to me what you're going to do when you get to that.
I usually cast up into it parallel to the branches so I don't get hung up.
Okay. So this is one thing that I will say I saw Denny Brower do the first time, and I was like, okay, he's kind of approaching this a lot differently. Most people I see, well, there's two things I see people do a lot. Okay, if all this is underwater and you don't really see it, so right here is all you're actually seeing above the water, okay? So how do you know, what is it that you're looking for that tells you what you might expect this tree to look like in the water? Anybody have an idea about that?